The transport ship Dawn's Promise drifted through the dark space between stars, carrying 3,000 humans toward their new home. Captain Jiho Park sat in the pilot's chair, watching the navigation screens with tired eyes. He had made this run 17 times before, and each time it was the same: boring, safe, predictable. Behind him, in the passenger sections, families slept in their pods. Dr. Somin Choi read a book to her daughter Hana, who was only 7 years old. The little girl asked questions about the new planet they would live on. Would there be animals? Would she make friends? Somin smiled and promised her that everything would be wonderful. Down in the engine room, Min-ho Kim checked the old systems one more time. The ship was not fancy or new, but it worked. That was all that mattered. In a few more days, they would reach New Harvest Colony, and these people would start building their farms and homes. Min-ho would head back to Earth for another group. Simple work. Honest work. Then the alarms started screaming. Jiho's screens lit up with warnings. A massive ship had appeared in front of them. It was 10 times bigger than Dawn's Promise, covered in weapons and armor. The design was Vectarian, one of the powerful species that controlled large parts of the galaxy. Jiho felt his stomach drop. Why would a warship stop a civilian transport? The communication system crackled to life. A deep voice spoke in the common galactic language. "Human vessel, this is War Chief Thalen of the Vectarian Empire. You have entered space where you must pay a passage tax. Stop your engines and prepare to be boarded." Jiho activated the reply system, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is Captain Park of Dawn's Promise. We're a civilian ship carrying families. We're traveling through neutral space. There is no tax here." Thalen's laugh was cold and harsh. "There is a tax wherever I say there is a tax. You will surrender half of your supplies and all of your credits, or you will surrender your ship. Choose quickly, human." Jiho looked at his cargo manifest. Half their supplies meant half their food, their medicine, their building materials. The colony would starve. The children would starve. He thought about little Hana and all the other kids on board. "We can't do that," Jiho said. "These people need these supplies to survive. Please, we have nothing of value to you. Just let us pass." There was a long silence. Then Thalen spoke again, and his voice was filled with contempt. "You lesser species are all the same. You think you can refuse us. You think your weakness deserves mercy. Let me teach you how the galaxy really works." The Vectarian warship opened fire. Not to disable, not to warn, to kill. Dawn's Promise shook as weapons tore through its hull. Sections depressurized instantly, sucking dozens of people into space. Jiho screamed into the communication system, begging them to stop, trying to surrender. But no one answered. The attack continued. Min-ho Kim was in the engine room when the boarding parties arrived. Vectarian soldiers, huge and armored, started executing the crew they found. Min-ho grabbed a metal pipe and stood in front of the reactor. If they got to it, they could take control of the ship completely. He managed to hit one soldier before they shot him down. His last thought was hoping the civilians would escape. Somin heard the explosions and the screaming. She grabbed Hana and ran toward the escape pod section. Other families were already there, panicking, crying, shoving each other to get inside the small pods. Somin got Hana into one pod and sealed the door. The little girl pressed her hands against the window, shouting for her mother. Somin smiled at her daughter one last time and hit the launch button. The pod shot away from the dying ship. Then a Vectarian soldier found Somin. She didn't even have time to scream. In total, 200 people escaped in pods. 2,800 died. Captain Jiho survived only because he was on the bridge when it was the last section to be breached. He launched himself into a pod and watched through the window as the Vectarians destroyed what was left of his ship. Then they flew away, laughing on the open channels about how easy it had been. Jiho spent 3 days in that pod before a rescue ship found him. When they brought him aboard, he just stared at nothing. He couldn't speak. He couldn't think. All he could see was the faces of the people he had failed to protect. The rescue ship brought the survivors to the nearest space station. Human diplomats arrived quickly. They interviewed the survivors, collected the evidence, and recorded everything. Then they took it all to the Galactic Council on the Core Worlds, where all the powerful species met to discuss galactic law. Ambassador Daeho Lee stood in the Great Council chamber, surrounded by representatives from dozens of alien species. He showed them the recordings from Dawn's Promise. He showed them the bodies. He showed them Thalen's communications where the war chief had laughed about killing civilians. This was murder, Daeho said. his voice shaking with rage. "This was a war crime. We demand justice. We demand the Vectarian Empire punish those responsible and pay reparations to the victims." The council members looked at each other. Some seemed uncomfortable. Others seemed bored. Finally, the head counselor, an ancient triloth with scales covering his body, spoke. "Ambassador Lee, this was an unfortunate incident. However, our investigation shows that your ship was indeed in disputed space. The Vectarian taxation was legal under their interpretation of boundary law. We suggest that in the future, human ships should simply pay such taxes to avoid conflict." Deho couldn't believe what he was hearing. "They murdered 3,000 people. Children, families, and you're telling us we should have paid them?" Another council member, this one from the Ascendant hierarchy, waved a tentacle dismissively. "Humanity is new to galactic civilization. You must understand that there are rules and hierarchies here. The Vectarian Empire is a respected power. We cannot simply punish them because your species failed to understand proper protocol." The vote was called. Should the council condemn the Vectarian Empire? The result was overwhelming. No. The matter was considered closed. Deho returned to Earth carrying the council's message. He went directly to the Capitol building and met with Prime Minister Hyejin Song. He gave her all the evidence, all the testimonies, and told her about the council's decision. Hyejin listened without speaking. Then she called an emergency session of the United Terran Assembly. Every human government representative gathered. They watched the recordings. They heard the stories. They learned that the galaxy had decided human lives didn't matter. Prime Minister Hyejin Song stood before the assembly and before the cameras broadcasting to all of Earth. She was not crying. She was not shouting. Her voice was cold and clear. "The Galactic Council has told us that we don't matter. They have told us that our children can be murdered, and it will be considered an unfortunate incident. They have told us to accept our place as a lesser species." She paused and her eyes burned with fury. "I reject their judgment. I reject their hierarchy, and I reject their authority over human lives. As of this moment, Earth formally declares a state of war with the Vectarian Empire. We will have justice. We will have vengeance, and we will show the galaxy that humanity will never bow to those who murder our children." The chamber erupted. Some representatives cheered. Others warned it was suicide. But the declaration was made. Earth was at war. Across the galaxy, the news spread quickly. The elder species laughed. The Vectarians celebrated. War Chief Thalen was given medals for his actions. Everyone agreed that this would be the shortest war in galactic history. Humanity had no real fleet, no powerful weapons, no allies. They were wrong. The Vectarian High Command treated Earth's declaration of war as entertainment. War Chief Thalen became a celebrity among his people. They made songs about how he had handled the weak humans. Children played games pretending to destroy human ships. The Vectarian Emperor ordered a subjugation fleet to Earth, not even bothering to send their main military forces. Just enough ships to make the humans surrender and beg for mercy. At the Galactic Council, ambassadors from various species gathered to watch what they assumed would be humanity's quick defeat. The Triloth representative made bets on how many days it would take. Most guessed less than a week. Some said humans would surrender before the Vectarian fleet even arrived, but on Earth something different was happening. General Sun Wukong stood in the military command center deep under the surface. Around him, screens showed every defense station, every ship, and every weapon humanity had built. He was not a young man anymore, and he had studied every war in human history. He knew something the galaxy didn't know. Humans were very, very good at killing each other. They had spent 10,000 years perfecting it. "Activate Protocol Ironside," Sun Wu ordered. "Convert all industrial facilities to military production. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource. We go to total war." Across Earth and its colonies, the transformation began. Stations that built cargo ships started building warships. Factories that made farming equipment started making weapons. Scientists who studied peaceful technology were reassigned to weapons research. Dr. Yuna Bayek led the weapons division. She was a small woman with tired eyes, but her mind was brilliant. She had spent years developing technologies the galaxy thought were impossible or impractical. Now she would prove them wrong. "Show me everything we have," Sun Wu told her. Yuna pulled up the files. "We have kinetic missiles that can accelerate asteroids to near light speed. We have nanomachines that can eat through ship hulls. We have cyber weapons designed to hack alien computer systems. And we have this. She showed him the Hellfire missiles. They used fusion reactions that burned hotter than the surface of a star. One missile could melt through the armor of any known warship. The galaxy thinks we're primitives, Una said quietly. They think we only know how to build slow ships and weak weapons. They don't understand that we've been preparing for war since the day we reached space. We just didn't tell anyone. The Vectarian subjugation fleet arrived at Earth 3 weeks after the war declaration. 50 warships, each one powerful enough to destroy a city. Their commander, Admiral Krovax, opened a communication channel to Earth. Humans, this is your final chance. Surrender now and accept Vectarian rule. Your planet will be incorporated into our empire. Refuse and we will bombard your world until nothing lives. Admiral Taejin Ro commanded Earth's defense from the orbital fortress called Retribution. He was younger than Sunwoo but had a reputation for aggressive tactics. He listened to Krovax's demands and smiled coldly. This is Admiral Ro. We have a counteroffer. Leave our space now and we'll let you live, Krovax laughed. You have 30 small ships against my 50 warships. Your fortress is impressive but outdated. This is your last warning. Then come and die, Taejin replied, and cut the channel. The Vectarian fleet moved forward, confident and proud. They had fought hundreds of battles and never lost. They expected the human ships to flee or surrender. Instead, the human ships accelerated directly toward them at speeds that should have been impossible. Krovax realized something was wrong when his sensors detected the human ship's acceleration. They were moving faster than any civilian ship should move. Then his weapons officer gave him worse news. Sir, those aren't converted cargo ships. They're purpose-built warships, and they're launching missiles. The space between the fleets filled with thousands of missiles. But these weren't normal missiles. They dodged and weaved using unpredictable flight patterns. The Vectarian point defense systems couldn't track them all. Dozens of Hellfire missiles struck home and Vectarian ships began to melt. Then the human ships did something no civilized species would do. 3 ships that had taken critical damage didn't retreat. Instead, they accelerated even faster and rammed directly into Vectarian warships. The explosions destroyed both the human ships and their targets. They're insane, Krovax shouted. Who sacrifices ships like that? Taejin heard the transmission and responded. We do, because we're not here to follow your rules. We're here to win. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Vectarian fleet was destroyed completely. Only 5 human ships survived and they were badly damaged. But Earth had won. Admiral Krovax tried to surrender in the final moments. But Taejin refused the surrender and destroyed his flagship. No prisoners. No mercy. The galaxy watched in shock. How had humanity won? The elder species checked their data again and again. It didn't make sense. Humans shouldn't have weapons this advanced. They shouldn't have ships this fast. They shouldn't have tactics this brutal. But they did. And now they weren't finished. Captain Jiwon Nam commanded a new type of human ship called Silent Fury. It was built for stealth, using technologies the galaxy didn't know humans possessed. She led a fleet of 10 stealth ships deep into Vectarian space, moving through the dark areas between stars where sensors couldn't detect them. Their target was a major Vectarian shipyard, where they built their warships. It was protected by defensive stations, patrol ships, and ground-based weapons. It should have been impossible to attack. Jiwon's ships approached slowly, carefully, using the gravity of nearby planets to mask their movements. When they were close enough, they launched a new type of weapon, cyber missiles that didn't explode. Instead, they attached to the shipyard's computers and uploaded a virus. The virus was created by engineer Kyung-Soo Han, who had lost his wife and children on Dawn's promise. He had spent months designing it specifically to hurt the Vectarians. Now it activated, every computer in the shipyard went haywire. Manufacturing robots started destroying the ships they were building. Defense systems turned and fired on Vectarian ships. Navigation systems gave every ship in the area false coordinates. Within minutes, the entire facility was tearing itself apart. Jiwon watched through her sensors as billions of credits worth of military infrastructure destroyed itself. Then she transmitted a message on the Vectarian military frequency. This is Captain Nam of Earth. We want you to remember the 3,000 people you murdered. We want you to remember their names. And we want you to understand that we will never stop. We will never surrender. We will find every Vectarian military asset in the galaxy, and we will destroy it. This is not a war. This is extermination. Then the Silent Fury and its sister ships vanished back into the dark, leaving chaos behind them. Over the next 3 months, human strike teams hit targets across Vectarian space. They destroyed supply depots, communication hubs, and military bases. They didn't try to hold territory. They just destroyed everything of military value and left. The Vectarians sent response fleets, but the humans were always gone before they arrived. They tried to predict human movements, but the attacks were random and unpredictable. They tried to negotiate, but humanity refused to even respond. War Chief Thalen, who had started this war by destroying Dawn's promise, sent a desperate message to the Vectarian High Command. We made a mistake. These humans are not a primitive species. They fight like nothing we've ever encountered. They don't care about honor or rules. They only care about winning. We need to sue for peace before they destroy our entire empire. But the Vectarian Emperor refused. Pride wouldn't allow him to surrender to a species the galaxy had considered weak. He ordered the main battle fleet mobilized, 500 warships, the largest military force assembled in a generation. The other species in the galaxy watched nervously. The Triloth Collective quietly moved their ships away from human territory. The Ascendant Hierarchy, which had considered attacking human colonies themselves, canceled those plans. In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Daeho Lee stood alone. No one wanted to speak with him. No one wanted to be associated with humanity, but they all watched the human ambassador, wondering what he would do next. Daeho knew they were afraid. Good. Fear meant respect. Fear meant they would never again dismiss humanity as weak. He transmitted a message back to Earth to Prime Minister Hyejin Song. The main Vectarian fleet is coming. They're bringing everything they have. This will be the real test. Hyejin read the message and looked at General Sunwoo. Can we win? Sunwoo looked at the tactical displays showing the massive Vectarian fleet. Then he looked at Earth's battered but determined forces. I don't know. But we're going to try. And if we lose, we'll make sure the galaxy never forgets what it costs to push humanity too far. The two fleets began moving toward their confrontation. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if humanity's surprising victories were just luck, or if they had truly changed the balance of power forever. The Battle of Titan Station became the bloodiest fight the galaxy had seen in centuries. 500 Vectarian warships approached Saturn, where Admiral Taijin Ro had positioned humanity's remaining fleet. He had only 70 ships left, and most of them were damaged from previous battles. Everyone knew this was a fight humanity couldn't win through normal means. Taijin stood on the bridge of Retribution 2, the replacement fortress built after the first one was destroyed. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. Many of them were teenagers who had joined after the war started. They were too young for this, but war didn't care about age. Sir, the Vectarian fleet is entering weapons range, the sensor officer reported. She was only 19 years old. Her name was Yuri, and she had lost her parents in the first Vectarian attack on a colony world. All ships, this is Admiral Ro, Taijin transmitted. Remember why we're here. Remember the 3,000 on Dawn's promise. Remember every colony they've destroyed. Today we show them that humanity doesn't surrender. We don't retreat. We win, or we make them regret they ever heard our name. The Vectarian commander was Supreme Commander Vraxis, the most decorated military leader in their empire. He had studied the previous battles and thought he understood human tactics. He expected the desperate kamikaze runs, the cyber attacks, the unpredictable movements. He had prepared for all of it. He hadn't prepared for what humanity actually did. As the fleets closed, the human ships released thousands of small objects into space. Vraxis's sensors detected them, but dismissed them as debris or decoys. They were wrong. Each object was a mine equipped with a simple computer and massive explosive charge. But they didn't just float randomly. They moved, adjusting their positions using tiny thrusters, forming a field of death between the two fleets. The Vectarian fleet plowed into the minefield. Explosions rippled through their formation. Ships took damage, slowing down, breaking formation. That's when the human ships struck. They came from 3 directions at once, having used Saturn's rings and moons to hide their approach. They fired everything they had. Missiles and kinetic rounds and weapons the Vectarians had never seen before. Then they did something that shocked Vraxis. They broadcast a false surrender signal. Several Vectarian ships, thinking the humans were giving up, lowered their shields to accept the surrender. In that moment, those ships exploded. The humans had loaded them with explosives and set them to detonate when Vectarian boarding parties approached. They tricked us with a false surrender, Fraxus roared. It violates every rule of warfare. His communications officer looked at him with fear in his eyes. Sir, they never agreed to follow our rules. They never signed the Galactic Warfare Conventions. The battle raged for 72 hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed. Space filled with debris and bodies. Human ships that couldn't fight anymore would ram into enemy vessels, turning themselves into weapons. Vectarian ships tried to maintain formation, tried to fight with honor. But honor meant nothing against an enemy willing to do anything to win. In the end, humanity lost 45 ships. 2/3 of their fleet was gone, but the Vectarian losses were catastrophic. 300 ships destroyed. Supreme Commander Vraxus survived but retreated with only 200 damaged vessels. Tejan stood on his ruined bridge, blood running down his face from a head wound. Around him, half his crew was dead. The fortress was barely functional. But they had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had won. Get me a channel to Earth, he ordered. When Prime Minister Hyejin's song appeared on the screen, Tejan saluted. Ma'am, we held. The Vectarian main fleet is broken. Hyejin looked at the casualty report scrolling across her screen. So many dead. So many ships lost. What did it cost us, Admiral? Everything, Tejan answered quietly. It cost us everything. On Earth, the victory was celebrated, but the celebrations felt hollow. Every city had hospitals overflowing with wounded soldiers. Dr. Boram Shin, a trauma surgeon, worked 20-hour shifts trying to save lives. She saw young men and women who had lost limbs, lost eyes, lost their minds to the horrors they had witnessed. We're winning, one of her patients said. A pilot named Junho, who had lost both legs. That's what the news says. We're winning. Boram didn't answer. She just adjusted his medication and moved to the next patient. What did winning mean when the cost was this high? In a military orphanage on the outskirts of the capital, young Hana Choi studied tactical manuals. She was 12 now. 5 years after watching her mother die. The orphanage housed thousands of children who had lost parents in the war. Every one of them was being trained for military service. There weren't enough adults left to fight. Hana's roommate, a girl named Mireille, who had lost her family in the Battle of Titan Station, asked her a question. Do you think we'll have to fight too? We're just kids. Hana looked at the tactical manual in her hands. It showed different ways to destroy enemy ships. Different ways to kill. If the war doesn't end soon, yes, we'll all have to fight. At the Galactic Council, things were changing. Ambassador Daeho Lee had always been isolated, but now he noticed something different. Some species were looking at him with something other than contempt. It might have been fear. It might have been respect. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. A representative from the Remnari Federation approached him privately. The Remnari were a peaceful species who had always been pushed around by the Elder Powers. Ambassador Lee, I want you to know that not all of us supported what happened to your people, the Remnari said. Many of us argued against the Council's decision. We were ignored. Daeho studied the alien carefully. And now you're telling me this because? Because we've discovered something. The attack on Dawn's Promise wasn't random. The Remnari handed him a data chip. This contains communication records we obtained through our intelligence service. The Galactic Council knew the Vectarians were targeting human ships. They allowed it to happen. Daeho felt his blood turn to ice. What? They wanted to test humanity, to see how you would respond before granting you full council membership. They thought you would negotiate, maybe pay reparations, accept your place. Instead, you declared war, and now everyone is terrified because you proved you're willing to burn down the galaxy, rather than accept being treated as lesser beings. Daeho looked at the data chip in his hand. 3,000 people dead as a test. Billions more dead in the resulting war. All of it could have been prevented. He returned to his quarters and sent an encrypted message to Earth. When Prime Minister Hyejin's song read it, she called an emergency cabinet meeting. General Sunwoo, Admiral Taejin, Dr. Unibike, and every other military leader joined via hologram. They tested us, Hyejin said, her voice shaking with rage. The council knew the attack was coming and did nothing. They wanted to see if we were worthy. The room erupted in anger. Sunwoo slammed his fist on the table. 3,000 dead for a test. And now billions more, all because they wanted to see what we would do. Dr. Unibake spoke quietly, but everyone listened. What are we going to do about it? Heejin looked at each face on the screens. Then she made her decision. We're going to show them what happens when you test humanity. General Sunwoo, prepare Operation Reckoning. Sunwoo nodded grimly. Ma'am, that operation targets not just Vectarian facilities but assets of every council species that voted to allow the test. It will expand the war significantly. I know, Heejin said, but they need to understand. You don't get to murder our children as an experiment and walk away. If they want to test us, they'll get the full results. Across human space, military forces prepared for the largest offensive yet, not just against the Vectarians but against the elder species themselves. Ships moved into position. Weapons were armed. Targets were selected. Ambassador Daeho stood before the Galactic Council and transmitted the evidence the Remnari had given him. Every species watched as the proof of their conspiracy played on the screens. You wanted to test us, Daeho said, his voice cold. You wanted to see what humanity would do when pushed. Now you're going to find out what we do when we discover we've been betrayed. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Some species denied involvement. Others tried to justify their actions. The elder species attempted to silence Daeho, but he continued speaking. Humanity's response begins in 1 hour. We will strike military targets across council space. We will show you that we have the capability to reach any world, destroy any target, and hurt anyone who hurts us. You thought we were weak. You thought we were primitive. You were wrong. The transmission ended. Daeho walked out of the council chamber, knowing he had just expanded the war beyond anything anyone had imagined. Behind him, species began arguing, blaming each other, trying to form alliances against the human threat. In her office on Earth, Prime Minister Heejin Song looked at the tactical displays showing human forces moving toward their targets. She thought about the children in the orphanages, the wounded in the hospitals, the dead floating in space around Titan Station. I hope we're doing the right thing, she said to General Sunwoo, who stood beside her. Sunwoo watched the displays silently for a moment. There is no right thing in war, ma'am. There's only winning and losing, and we've already decided we won't lose. The hour expired. Across the galaxy, human forces struck simultaneously. The Triloth Collective lost 3 major military bases. The Ascendant Hierarchy's primary shipyard exploded in a flash of nuclear fire. Smaller species who had voted for the test found their defensive stations destroyed. But the most terrifying strike was the demonstration. Dr. Unabek's ultimate weapon, a missile that accelerated to near light speed and struck an uninhabited moon in Vectarian space. The impact released enough energy to shatter the moon completely, sending fragments everywhere. Humanity broadcast a message to every species in the galaxy. We can do this to any world, any station, any target. We choose not to because we're not monsters. But make no mistake, if you push us further, we will use every weapon we have. This war started because you thought we were weak. It continues because you refuse to admit you were wrong. End it now, or we'll end it for you. The galaxy realized it had gone too far. The war entered its 2nd year, and nothing was the same anymore. The Vectarian Empire was collapsing, torn apart by internal rebellions and external attacks, but the conflict had spread far beyond them. The Triloth Collective, fearing humanity's growing power and angry about the strikes on their territory, formally declared war on Earth. 3 other elder species joined them. They called it Maintaining Galactic Order. Everyone knew the truth. They were terrified of what humanity had become. Admiral Taijin Ro stood on the bridge of his new flagship, watching the tactical displays with exhausted eyes. He commanded a fleet that included not just human ships but vessels from the Remnari Federation and Doshi Confederation. These species had sided with humanity, disgusted by the Council's actions. But even with allies, Taijin's forces were outnumbered 10-1. Sir, the Triloth fleet is approaching, his tactical officer reported. It was Yuri again, the young woman who had survived the Battle of Titan Station. She had aged years and months. They all had how many ships? Taijin asked. 347. And they have reinforcements coming. Taijin looked at his own fleet. 92 ships total. 40 human, the rest from their allies. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But they couldn't retreat. Behind them was a human colony world with 2 million civilians. All ships, combat formation Delta, prepare for asymmetric engagement. The fleets met in the dark space between stars. But humanity didn't fight the way the Triloth expected. Captain Jiwan Nam, now commanding multiple stealth vessels, led her ships through the Triloth formation like ghosts. They didn't attack the warships directly. Instead, they targeted the support vessels, the ammunition ships, the fuel tankers. Without support, the Triloth warships quickly ran low on supplies. Their powerful weapons couldn't fire without ammunition. Their shields weakened without power. That's when the main human fleet struck, focusing all firepower on one ship at a time, overwhelming them before moving to the next target. The battle lasted 8 hours. The Triloth fleet retreated after losing 70 ships. They had never faced an enemy that fought so intelligently and so ruthlessly at the same time. But Tajin's victory came at a cost. 25 ships destroyed, including several from their allies. Thousands more dead. After the battle, Tajin received a private message from the Doshi commander. "Admiral, my government is questioning our alliance. They see the casualties and wonder if opposing the council is worth it." Tajin understood. The elder species were powerful. Fighting them meant accepting terrible losses. "Tell your government that humanity understands if you need to withdraw." "We won't hold it against you," the Doshi commander hesitated. "And if we stay? Then you'll have Earth's gratitude forever. But I won't lie to you. More of your people will die. On Earth, the cost of war was visible everywhere. Cities had rolling blackouts because all power went to military production. Food was rationed. Every person between 16 and 60 was either fighting, building weapons, or supporting the war effort somehow. Dr. Boram Shin worked in a hospital that had once been a sports stadium. They had converted it when the regular hospitals overflowed. She moved between beds where soldiers lay recovering from wounds. Some would heal. Many wouldn't. A young pilot named Junho, who had lost his legs at Titan Station, was learning to use prosthetics. He asked Boram a question that many asked. "Doctor, why are we still fighting?" "The Vectarians are broken. Why don't we just stop?" Boram sat beside his bed, too tired to stand anymore. "Because the galaxy won't let us stop. They see us as a threat now. If we stop fighting, they'll destroy us to eliminate that threat. We have to win completely or we'll lose everything." "That's not fair," Junho said. "No, it's not. But war never is." In the military orphanage, Hana Choi celebrated her 15th birthday by graduating at the top of her class. She received orders to report to Retribution 2 as a junior tactical officer. Her friend Mireille was assigned to a destroyer. Both girls knew their chances of surviving the war were low. The night before shipping out, Hana wrote in her journal, "Mother wanted me to study life and discover new things. Instead, I've learned to end life and destroy things. I'm sorry, Mom. But someone has to fight, and I'd rather it be me than someone else's child. Maybe when this is over, if I survive, I can go back to being the person you wanted me to be." At the Galactic Council, everything was falling apart. The elder species were dividing into factions. Some wanted to negotiate with humanity. Others demanded total war until humanity was destroyed. Smaller species that had been oppressed for centuries saw their chance for freedom and started their own rebellions. Ambassador Deho, Lee walked through the council station and saw fights breaking out between different species delegations. The galactic order that had existed for thousands of years was crumbling, and he had helped break it. A Remnari diplomat found him in the observation deck looking out at the stars. "Ambassador Lee, you look troubled." "I am," Deho admitted. "We wanted justice for 3,000 dead. Now billions are dying across the galaxy. Did we do the right thing?" The Remnari was silent for a moment. "My people have been ruled by the elder species for 500 years. They told us we were too weak to govern ourselves. They took our resources and gave us nothing. We accepted it because we believed them when they said it was for our own good. Then we watched humanity refuse to accept that same treatment. You showed us that the strong only stay strong because the weak allow it. But at what cost?" Deho asked. "At whatever cost is necessary. Freedom always costs blood. The question is whether you think it's worth it." Meanwhile, Captain Jiwon Nam led a mission that would change everything. Intelligence had discovered that the Triloth Collective was building a superweapon, something that could destroy a planet from across a star system. If completed, it would give them the power to hold Earth hostage. Jiwon's stealth fleet infiltrated deep into Triloth space, moving through areas that should have been impossible to penetrate. They found the facility building the weapon. It was on a moon, protected by defensive stations and a full fleet. "We can't fight our way in," Jiwon's second officer said. Jiwon studied the tactical display. Then she made a decision that would haunt her. "We don't need to fight. We just need to get close enough. Her ship approached the moon using every stealth technology humanity had developed. They weren't detected until they were almost at the facility. Then Jiwan armed her ship's final weapon, Dr. Unibike's most terrible creation, nanomachines that would disassemble matter at the molecular level. Everyone to the escape pods. You have 2 minutes, Jiwan ordered her crew. Captain, what about you? Her second officer asked. Someone needs to make sure this hits the target. That's me. Now go. Her crew evacuated. Jiwan sat alone on her bridge and flew her ship directly at the facility. The Triloth defenses fired, but they were too late. The Silent Fury crashed into the weapon facility and released its cargo. The nanomachine spread rapidly, consuming the facility, the weapon, and everything within 100 kilometers, including Captain Jiwan Nam. Her last transmission was simple. Mission accomplished. Tell Earth I'm sorry I couldn't come home. Her sacrifice destroyed the superweapon, but it also killed 30,000 Triloth civilians who lived near the facility. When the news spread, some humans celebrated the victory. Others were horrified at the civilian deaths. Dr. Yuna Bayek, who had created the nanomachines, shut herself in her lab for 3 days. When she emerged, she went to Chaplain Yunji Quan, one of the few religious leaders still serving with the military. I created the weapon that killed those civilians, Yuna said. I created the technology that Captain Nam used. Their blood is on my hands. Yunji didn't offer easy comfort. Yes, it is. And you'll have to carry that weight forever. The question is what you do with that burden. What can I do? The weapons are already made. The war continues. You can remember what war costs. You can make sure that when this ends, humanity doesn't forget the price we paid, both what we lost and what we took from others. The war continued. Supreme Commander Vraxus, who had led the Vectarian main fleet at Titan Station, watched his empire crumbling. Rebellions erupted on colony worlds. Their economy was destroyed. Their military was scattered. He sent a secret message to General Sun Wukang. General, this is Vraxus. I wish to discuss terms of surrender. Sun Wu brought the message to Prime Minister He Jin-song. Her cabinet was divided. Some wanted to accept. The war had cost Earth 2 billion lives. Their economy wouldn't recover for generations. Others wanted to continue until the Vectarian Empire was completely destroyed. Admiral Jiho Park, who had survived Dawn's promise and become one of humanity's heroes, was asked his opinion. He was an old man now, aged by stress and loss. He thought about Minho dying in the engine room, about Soman hiding her daughter in an escape pod, about all the others who had died that day. If we continue fighting, we become what we hate, Jiho said quietly. The Vectarians destroyed a civilian ship and celebrated it. If we destroy their empire completely just because we can, how are we different? A younger officer argued back. They started this. They deserve to pay. Yes, they do. But there's paying and there's genocide. One is justice. The other is vengeance. And vengeance won't bring back the people we lost. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Prime Minister He Jin-song made her decision. We'll agree to negotiate. But our terms will be harsh. And the other elder species that declared war on us must also come to the table. We're not stopping the war with the Triloth and the others, not yet. Not until they all understand the cost of what they did. Messages went out across the galaxy. Humanity was willing to negotiate peace with the Vectarian Empire. But the war with the Galactic Council would continue until all the elder species accepted new terms for galactic civilization. The elder species had a choice, accept that humanity had earned its place through blood and fire, or continue fighting and risk their own destruction. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the war would finally end, or if it would spread even further. The negotiations took place on a neutral station far from any major system. Prime Minister He Jin-song led the human delegation. Across the table sat representatives from the Vectarian Empire, the Triloth Collective, and the other elder species who had declared war on humanity. Supreme Commander Vraxus looked nothing like the proud warrior who had led 500 ships to Titan Station. His scales were dull, his eyes tired. Beside him sat the new Vectarian Emperor, young and inexperienced. Thrust into power after the old emperor died from stress, the Triloth ambassador kept her tentacles wrapped tightly around herself, a sign of anxiety in her species. The other elder species representatives looked equally uncomfortable. They had come to negotiate with a species they had once dismissed as primitives. General Sun Wukang stood behind He Jin, his hand never far from his sidearm. Admiral Taejin Ro and Ambassador Dae-ho Lee flanked her on both sides. They were all exhausted, carrying the weight of 3 years of war. Hyejin spoke first. "We are here because you finally understand that you cannot defeat us, not without destroying yourselves in the process. We accept your request for peace, but our terms are not negotiable." The Triloth ambassador started to object, but Hyejin cut her off. "You tested us by allowing the murder of 3,000 civilians. You thought we would beg and negotiate. Instead, we showed you what humanity does when pushed too far. Now you will live with the consequences." Hyejin laid out Earth's terms. The Vectarian Empire would be dissolved, its territories granted independence. War Chief Thalen and 300 other commanders would face trial for war crimes, conducted by neutral species, not by humanity. The elder species would pay reparations not to Earth, but to a fund that would help all the smaller species they had exploited for centuries. Most importantly, the Galactic Council would be reformed. No longer would it be ruled by the strongest species. Every species would have equal representation, with decisions made by majority vote, not by the whims of elder powers. "These terms are unacceptable," the Triloth ambassador said. "You're asking us to give up our authority, our position, everything we've built." Sun Wu stepped forward. "You built your authority on the backs of weaker species. You maintained your position through intimidation and violence. And you almost destroyed the galaxy by pushing humanity into a war we never wanted but were willing to finish. Accept our terms or we'll finish it anyway." The elder species huddled together, arguing in whispers. Finally, they agreed, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. Humanity had proven it could and would burn down the galaxy, rather than accept being treated as lesser beings. The Treaty of New Earth was signed 6 days later. War Chief Thalen was the first to face trial. He stood in a courtroom filled with representatives from 100 species, accused of murdering 3,000 civilians. His defense was simple. "I was following the laws of my empire. I had the right to demand payment from ships passing through our space. If they refused, I had the right to take action." The prosecutor, a human lawyer named Young-Soo Park, stood and addressed the court. "You had no right to murder children. You had no right to execute civilians. You had no right to celebrate their deaths. The law you followed was unjust, and you will pay for following it." Thalen was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. 300 other commanders received similar sentences. The trials took months, and every session was broadcast across the galaxy. Everyone watched as the mighty Vectarian military leadership was held accountable for their actions. But the trials weren't the hardest part of peace. The hardest part was learning to live with what had been done. Dr. Boram Shin continued working in hospitals, now treating both human and alien patients. Many of the alien wounded were former enemies captured in battle. Some humans protested, saying resources should go to human victims first. Boram ignored them. "I'm a doctor," she told one angry protester. "I treat anyone who needs treatment. If we refuse to help former enemies, we're no better than they were." Slowly, very slowly, the healing began. Not just physical healing, but the harder work of emotional recovery. Veterans gathered in support groups, sharing stories about the horrors they had witnessed. Young Hana Choi, now 20 years old, sat in one such group. She had served for 5 years on Retribution 2, watching friends die in battle after battle. She had killed enemy soldiers, ordered attacks that destroyed ships, and seen things no person should see. Now she was trying to figure out how to live in peacetime. "I don't know who I am without the war," she admitted to the group. "For most of my life I've been a soldier. Now what am I?" An older veteran, a woman named Sora, who had lost both arms in the Battle of Titan Station, answered her. "You're whoever you choose to be. The war made us into killers. Peace gives us the chance to be something else." Hana thought about that. She remembered her mother, Dr. Somin Choi, who had been a xenobiologist. Someone who studied life instead of ending it. She made a decision. She would return to school and study what her mother had loved. Maybe she could help discover new species instead of destroying them. It was a small decision in a galaxy still healing from massive wounds, but it was a start. Admiral Taejin Ro retired from the military and wrote a book about the war. It became required reading in military academies across the galaxy, human and alien alike. The final chapter was titled The Cost of Victory. In it, he wrote, "We won because we were willing to do anything to survive. We used tactics the galaxy considered dishonorable. We struck civilians when military targets were nearby. We refused surrender and showed no mercy. We became monsters to fight monsters. I write this so that future generations understand what we paid to win. 2 billion human lives, countless alien lives, our humanity itself. We proved we could be as ruthless as any species in the galaxy. Let that be the last time such proof is needed. The book sparked debates across human space. Some thought Taijin was being too harsh on humanity's actions. Others thought he wasn't harsh enough. Everyone agreed that the questions he raised were important. Captain Jiwon Nam became a hero after her sacrifice destroying the Triloth superweapon. Statues were erected in her honor. Schools were named after her. But some people pointed out that she had also killed 30,000 civilians. Was she a hero or a war criminal? The debate never ended. Ambassador Daeho Lee became the first human arbiter general of the new Galactic Council. He spent his days mediating disputes between species, trying to prevent new conflicts. It was exhausting work, and sometimes he wondered if it was worth it. Then he would remember the 3,000 people on Dawn's Promise. He would remember the billions who died in the war that followed. And he would return to work, determined to make sure their deaths meant something. 10 years after the war ended, humanity had truly become part of galactic civilization. Human ships traveled everywhere, no longer as conquerors but as equals. Trade flourished. Cultural exchange happened. Slowly, the wounds began to heal, but they never disappeared completely. Admiral Jiho Park, now very old, gave a speech at the 20th anniversary memorial for Dawn's Promise. Hana Choi attended, standing beside her mother's name carved into the black stone memorial. Thousands of other names surrounded it. Jiho spoke slowly, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. 20 years ago, 3,000 people died because the galaxy saw us as weak. In response, we went to war and billions more died. We proved we were strong. We earned respect through blood and fire. But I ask you all to remember what that respect cost. Remember the children who grew up without parents. Remember the soldiers who came home broken. Remember the enemies we killed who were just following orders just like us. He paused, looking at all the names on the memorial. We won, but victory doesn't erase the cost. It doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't heal the scars. All it does is ensure that our loved ones didn't die for nothing. We must make sure that the galaxy they died to change remains changed. That no species ever again treats another as lesser. That no one ever again assumes weakness invites violence without consequence. Hana listened to his words and thought about her mother. Soman had been a peaceful person who wanted to study and understand alien life. She had died violently, murdered for the crime of being on a ship that refused to pay an unjust tax. Everything that followed came from that moment. After the ceremony, Hana walked through the memorial gardens with Lieutenant Junho Lee, who she had met years ago during the war. Junyo now worked as a teacher, training young people in conflict resolution and diplomacy. His prosthetic legs had been upgraded several times and he walked almost normally now. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the council had just condemned the attack? Unyo asked. If they had given us justice instead of dismissing us? Every day, Hana answered. All of this could have been prevented, but it wasn't. And now we have to live with what we did to survive. They walked in silence for a while, surrounded by the names of the dead. Across the galaxy, former enemies worked together. Humans and Vectarians served on the same ships. Triloth and humans collaborated on scientific projects. The Remnari Federation and Doshi Confederation became humanity's closest allies. Bonds forged in war now strengthened in peace. But everyone remembered. Veterans on all sides carried scars, physical and mental. Children who had grown up during the war knew nothing but violence until peace came suddenly and left them lost. Entire generations were shaped by those 3 years of conflict. Dr. Yuna Bayek, who had created many of humanity's most devastating weapons, devoted her later years to peaceful technology. She developed medical treatments, environmental restoration systems, and technologies to help rebuild damaged worlds. She never spoke about the weapons she had made, but everyone knew. Her redemption was personal and ongoing. In the new Galactic Council chambers, species that had once been bitter enemies debated and argued, but they resolved their disputes through words rather than weapons. It wasn't perfect. Old hatreds took time to fade, but it was better than war. Ambassador Daeho Lee, now an old man preparing to retire, gave a final lecture to a class of young diplomats from many species. A Vectarian student asked him a question. Ambassador, do you think humanity would have gone to war if the Council had acted differently? If we had shown you respect from the beginning? Deho thought carefully before answering. Respect isn't given freely in this galaxy. It's earned. The Council didn't respect us because we hadn't proven ourselves. The tragedy is that we had to prove ourselves through war. I hope your generation finds better ways to earn and give respect. Another student, human, asked a harder question. Sir, was it worth it? All those deaths, all that destruction just to be treated as equals? Deho was quiet for a long time. Finally, he answered, I don't know. Every day I think about the people who died. I wonder if there was another way. But I also know that if we hadn't fought, humanity would have remained victims forever. The galaxy only respected us after we proved we couldn't be ignored. That's a terrible lesson, but it's the lesson the galaxy taught us. He looked at each student, human and alien alike. Your generation inherited a galaxy changed by war. Your responsibility is to build a galaxy where such wars are never necessary again, where species are respected not for their weapons, but for their contributions, where disputes are resolved through justice, not violence. It won't be easy. Old patterns are hard to break, but you must try because the alternative is too terrible to accept. The class ended. The students left, carrying the lessons of a war none of them had fought but all of them lived with. That night, Hana Choi looked up at the stars from Earth. She thought about her mother, about all the people who had died, about the galaxy that had been bought with so much blood. She thought about the future she was helping to build, studying alien life and fostering understanding between species. The war was over. The killing had stopped, but the consequences would echo for generations. The galaxy had learned its lesson. When pushed too far, when treated with contempt, when forced to fight for survival, humanity had proven it would do whatever was necessary. The elder species had discovered too late that underestimating others leads to catastrophe. Peace reigned now. But everyone remembered the cost, and that memory, painful as it was, helped ensure that such a war would never happen again. The stars shone down on a changed galaxy, one where humanity had earned its place among equals through terrible sacrifice. It was not the future anyone had wanted, but it was the future they had built together, human and alien from the ashes of a war that should never have happened. And in that imperfect peace they tried to build something better.